Welcome to our comprehensive NFL news roundup for today. I'm your host, and I'll be your guide through all the latest updates from the National Football League. Times 1. Arizona Cardinals. Kicking things off with the Arizona Cardinals, where there have been some notable developments. Running back James Conner, dealing with a calf issue, was limited in practice today. Also, offensive lineman Kelvin Beachum is nursing a hand injury and was limited as well. In addition, safety Javonte Moffat has been placed on the practice squad injured reserve. This is certainly something to keep an eye on as the Cardinals aim to bounce back after a tough start to their season. Now, let's move on to our next piece of news. Times 2. Atlanta Falcons. Turning our attention to the Atlanta Falcons, there are updates on running back Cordarrelle Patterson. After being inactive in Week 1 due to a thigh injury, Patterson was a full participant in practice today, a positive sign for Falcons fans. However, tight end Jonnu Smith and defensive end Calais Campbell were held out of practice for some well-deserved rest, and cornerback Jeff Okudah is dealing with a foot issue. These updates might impact the Falcons' preparations for their upcoming games. And now, it's time to move on to the next team. Times 3. Baltimore Ravens. Let's head over to Baltimore, where tight end Mark Andrews was limited in practice due to a quad injury. Andrews missed Week 1 because of this injury, and his status moving forward is something to monitor closely. The Ravens also had a few key players, including offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley and cornerback Marlon Humphrey, who did not practice due to their respective injuries. Safety Marcus Williams and his pectoral injury also kept him sidelined. Before we dive into more news, let's shift gears. Times 4. Carolina Panthers. Breaking news from the Carolina Panthers as cornerback J.C. Horn has suffered a serious and freak hamstring injury, according to head coach Frank Reich. Surgery and injured reserve are potential options for Horn. This is a significant blow to the Panthers' defense. Also, left guard Brady Christensen has been placed on injured reserve, affecting their offensive line. Now, let's continue our coverage with the next piece of news. Times 5. Chicago Bears. In Chicago, cornerback Kyler Gordon is not expected to practice today, as confirmed by head coach Matt Eberflus. The Bears will be keeping a close eye on his hand injury as they look to make adjustments on defense. Moving on to the next team on our list. Times 6. Cincinnati Bengals. Good news for the Cincinnati Bengals as quarterback Joe Burrow, dealing with a calf issue, was a full participant in today's practice. The Bengals will be relieved to see their star quarterback getting back to full health. Running back Chris Evans and defensive end Joseph Ossai were limited in practice, while linebacker Logan Wilson and safety Daxton Hill were also limited. This team seems to be managing its injuries well as they prepare for upcoming games. Now, let's pivot to another team. Times 7. Dallas Cowboys. In Dallas, wide receiver Brandon Cooks did not practice today due to a knee issue. The Cowboys will be closely monitoring his status as they continue their season. Offensive guard Tyler Smith and safety Donovan Wilson were also held out of practice. And now, we move on to our next update. Times 8. Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are taking a cautious approach with wide receiver Jerry Jeudy's hamstring injury, according to head coach Sean Payton. Safety Caden Stearns, who suffered a knee injury, has been placed on injured reserve. This move indicates that Stearns' injury could be season-ending. On a positive note, wide receiver Lil Jordan Humphrey has been signed to the active roster from the practice squad. Now, let's switch our focus to the next team. Times 9. Detroit Lions. In Detroit, offensive tackle Taylor Decker did not practice today due to an ankle issue, while cornerback Emmanuel Moseley was limited with knee and hamstring problems. Keep an eye on these injuries as the Lions look to build on their Week 1 performance. Now, it's time to move on to our next piece of news. Times 10. Houston Texans. The Houston Texans are dealing with several injuries. Wide receiver Noah Brown has been placed on injured reserve due to a groin injury. Another wide receiver, John Mechie III, was limited in practice today with a hamstring issue. Tight end Dalton Schultz is also dealing with a thigh injury. Defensive tackle Hassan Ridgeway has been placed on injured reserve, and safety Jalen Pitter is considered day-to-day with a bruised lung. Now, let's proceed to the next team. Times 11. Indianapolis Colts. In Indianapolis, running back Zach Moss, who missed Week 1 with a forearm injury, is making progress, according to head coach Shane Steichen. Moss was a full participant in practice, which is a positive sign for the Colts. However, offensive guard Quentin Nelson and offensive tackle Braden Smith did not practice today due to their respective injuries. And now, it's time for our next update. Times 12. Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jacksonville Jaguars are keeping an eye on guard Brandon Scherff, who did not practice today due to an ankle injury. Now, let's move on to our next piece of news. Times 13. Kansas City Chiefs. In Kansas City, running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire won't practice today due to illness, according to head coach Andy Reid. tight end Travis Kelce and cornerback L'Jarius Sneed were limited in practice. On another note, defensive lineman Chris Jones will return to practice and is expected to play against Jacksonville after signing a new one-year deal with the team. Now, let's shift our focus to the next team. Times 14, Las Vegas Raiders. In Las Vegas, wide receiver Jacoby Meyers remains in the concussion protocol, according to head coach Josh McDaniels. This situation will be closely monitored as the Raiders prepare for their upcoming game. That wraps up our extensive NFL news roundup for today. Stay tuned for more updates as the NFL season unfolds. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time for more exciting football news.